we could have it out in the auditorium.
Oh yeah, we can have it out where everybody can
Yeah, spread
separate.
everybody out, and yeah.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to be in there. I mean, that's why we had it last time, wasn't it? We didn't
Yeah.
really, because we didn't have that many there anyway. So we're going to
Matter of
go
fact,
ahead. Uh, yeah,
Get that right.
we're going to go ahead and get started. We're on Micah 5 tonight. The first couple of chapters that we read about is on kind of the judgments against Judah and Israel.
can I ask, did you guys
Yeah,
get your
the lessons.
the ones I sent
Yeah,
out? Did you get them yet?
yeah, they came today actually. We got it
Okay.
in hand.
Good.
Okay.
I'm going to try to bring next week's Sunday so we can send it out again, hopefully.
Okay. Okay.
In the chapters 4 and 5, and then the rest of them, it's a more positive note as far as there's promises coming up. Yes, there's judgments coming upon them, but the people, um, God's telling the people that, kind of there is hope. And there's a lot of, well, in this chapter, there's a verse that I think everybody has heard, and we'll read it here in just a minute. Verse 1 starts out and says, Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. When the different nations is coming against Israel, um, like Assyria and Babylon and those countries that come upon them, that's what he's talking about. In all these minor prophets that we kind of visited about already, it's a partial uh, prophecy that's most of them are partially already fulfilled by the capturing of uh, the Israelites by Assyria and or Babylon when they were taken captured. So, but it also is looking forward to the time of the last days when the nations are going to try to capture Israel again. And in this particular case, the next verse is what it's kind of referring to. It does talk about, and it's in the history. It's before Christ came. It says verse 2 says, But thou Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. Now, who was born in Bethlehem?
Jesus.
Jesus was. Now there were two Bethlehems in the time of the around that area, but this Bethlehem, it talks about of Judea. It goes on later on and says of Judea. There's another Bethlehem that's up north, but this one is specifically uh, talked about that, and it's later on it talks about David being the a part of that too. Bethlehem actually says it means a house of bread, and that's a shadow or a type of Christ being the bread of life for us. Okay. He is coming again, and he's going to uh, take charge, and he's going to punish those nations that have come against Israel. That's what we're getting ready to read. Verse 3 says, Therefore will he give them up until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. Now, this is all history before Christ had even came. All right. So Christ comes, and then the Romans come and they occupy the areas, and then later on they disperse, they run all the Jews off, and for years they didn't have a country. Now Israel was a new nation, born in 47, and reborn, I guess if you want to say. and they're starting to go back to that nation. I read somewhere, I think it was right, I'd have to look it up real quick, um, that there's something like 7 million Jews or more, I think, in Israel, and it's like a state, I think, smaller than New Jersey. That's what it is. It's pretty small. But it's talking about that time that when they think the people that's coming against Israel, when they think they've won the battle, Christ is going to come. And that's also coming in the end days too. When the nations start to attack Israel and they think they're going to wipe them out with the Antichrist, Christ's going to return and take hold of the battle. And
You know, back in the second verse there, I was reading in your notes and also Adam Clark. I love that part, what said he is the creator of all things. So he's
mhm,
eternal and no part of what was created. All things have been created. Whatever has not been created is God.
right,
Jesus is the creator of all things, therefore he is God, for he cannot be part of his own work. He didn't create himself, but I mean, he already existed. I love that part where he says, well,
no,
I love to think that about we live in time, but time's not always existed.
right,
We're living in eternity right now, okay? But we have a time of this natural life. But then after that, we're going back to eternity.
mhm,
God's always been. And Christ has always been. It just, again, there you go. I was driving down the road where I'd been somewhere, and I was looking out over the fields and stuff, and I thought, oh, I went down to where my grandmother was buried down that little town called Briartown down in southeastern Oklahoma. And as I was coming back, I was looking at it and I said, God created all this. He had to because it's here. And it's well, I get all excited when I think about Christ and living forever. Okay.
it's going to be interesting. It's going to be different for sure. Verse 4 says, "And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord God, Lord his God, and they shall abide, for now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man shall be the peace, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men." Here it's talking about when uh, when they are conquered, and they will get conquered. We do know that now, that God's going to bring them back out of it. God gives them favor, and it's going to take just a few people. When the remnant came back to Jerusalem and came back to Israel, there wasn't, I mean, yeah, there were a lot of people, but it wasn't a whole lot. It had passed, it had been several, 40 some years, 70 years, sorry, 70 some years. And it took them over 20 years just to kind of establish themselves back the way they were. They were going to start building the temple and everything else when they got back at first, but they delayed that, as we read in some of the other books that we've studied so far. And God has reminded them a couple of times, you need to start uh, building my temple back. That's why he sent them back for that. Anyway, we're kind of going back before that a little bit. Verse 6 says, "And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod in the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian when he cometh into our land, when he treadeth within our borders." Now, back when Assyria captured them, they let them go. It wasn't that, they rose up against them and took over. So this is more prophetic, what's going to happen in the future. For their part of capturing them and taking over, they're going to be punished in the latter days. All the nations that have went against Israel is going to do that, going to pay the price. Verse 7, "And the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people as a dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass. that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of man. So it's kind of like when we talk about Abraham having children as the sand of the sea. How do you count the dew? When the dew falls, it falls everywhere and it just blankets everything. And that's what it's saying. The remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people, as a dew from the Lord, as showers upon the grass. When it rains, it pours. So there's going to be a lot of people there for them. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, as a young lion among the flocks of sheep, who if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. So Jacob's going to take, saying that Israel, the nation of Israel, is going to take their place again. And that's because their favor with God, because he has had that. We remember that it talks about that the lion's going to lay down with the lamb in the latter days, in the end time. And I kind of think that's what it's going to be. He's going to be in strength, but yet he's not going to have to use that strength because he's already conquered the people. He's already taken care of that.
Who were the Maccabees?
The Maccabees were actually before Christ, I think. I'd have to go back and look to see the time period of that. It's either right before Christ or right after Christ. I think maybe it was after Christ, because when they held up, when they went back to the castle basically, or the city, they stayed there for I don't know how long. They didn't have any food after a certain time, but they put up a big war against them. I don't know what that. I don't have that right here. I'd have to look that up when the time is. But it's in between Christ. I'm pretty sure it's in between Christ and the Old Testament. It's that time frame. So it's like, somewhere maybe 30 or 40 BC, maybe. That's what I'd have to guess at. Verse 9, thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots. I will cut off the cities of thy land, and throw down all strongholds. I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers. Thy graven images also will I cut off, and thy standing images out of the midst of thee, and thou shalt no more worship the work of thine hands. So all the things that have kept them from God until then, God's going to wipe out. That's how, as the nations started infiltrating, they were bringing them in and starting to assimilate their religions and their gods and all the things that God told them to watch out for. Now God's going to wipe them out and going to take all that away from them. Verse 14 says, and I will pluck up the groves out of the midst of thee, so will I destroy thy cities. Groves is another reference to the images of the gods that they had. There was, I think, as Ashtaroth was the god of the groves. It's kind of like today when they value the trees, the tree huggers, more than people actually even. That's kind of, it's even more so, but that's kind of what we see. And the last verse,
more than the Creator.
Yeah, more than the Creator. And the last verse says, and I will execute vengeance in anger and fury upon the heathen, such as they have not heard. So he's going to be the one that's going to take care of them, of the other nations. We don't have to worry about it too much. We don't have to, we're not going to need to play a part. He's going to be doing that. He's going to be running over them. So.
Do you think that's talking about the millennium?
I do. I do. Yeah, because it hasn't really happened up to now. Like I said, part of this is kind of it did take place, part of it, but some of it hasn't taken place. And I was just listening to right before I got on here, I was listening to Philip and Mike. Looked like they had taped another couple of sessions. So if you want to get on Facebook, it was pretty good. I've heard several times, just like Philip said, that on TBN and some of the other channels, there's nothing left in prophecy to happen except the coming of Christ. And Philip said, well, that's not quite right. He said, yes, there is. There's some wars that's supposed to happen. And so he gets into that. And that if you're interested in that, you might, the segment that he had, the highlights, is only like 18 minutes long. So you can either go look on Mike's page, or I think Maria Barnett is putting it on that Day of the Lord Facebook page too, that I kind of told you all about when Philip was teaching. I think back in April. Yeah, yeah. So, well, anything else tonight? Any
No.
questions? All right.
No.
Well, appreciate everybody making the effort here to come out on such a no, like we say.
We enjoyed it.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it when you send me the invite, because if I'm looking, if I look at my phone, it reminds me.
Oh, good. Well, I try to send it
I
out about
reminded her.
She reminded me tonight.
about 30 minutes in advance. I try to send it out a little bit early. So,
Yeah, that's good. I don't always look at my phone at that time, but when I do,
yeah, pops
Yeah.
up.
yeah.
All right. Well, y'all have a good week then.
You too.
Thank you.
Y'all do
Join-
the same.
We'll
Do
be on
what?
Facebook and YouTube this weekend. So
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm going to put this
Bye-bye.
on there too. I got it recorded, I think, this week. Last week I didn't get it recorded. So.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
We'll
brother.
see y'all.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.